Okay, we're going to start with the easy question, which is we're going to have you say your name and spell it.
Okay, it's Janet Wortman, JanetWortman.
Great. And now we're going to do the cookie thing. This is just like big Hollywood movie here.
Very nice.
You want to take one? Hey.
So tell me about the place that's up on the river and how it's a part of your family.
Well, the Brooks family, they've been here since time immemorial, right? We have a house that's up the hill, up Rackway Hill, that overlooks the mouth. But they also had a place up the river, up by Brooks Riffle. It's one named after the family. And so that place had been there for years and years and years. And that was a place that they would go. It was lots of acres up there, and they would have a huge garden. They had lots of apple trees. They had a beautiful home up there and so many roses, just abundance of roses and flowers. So, but it was also a very hardworking place. So you went up there and you would, even as little kids, we would go up there, because I was born in '57, so I wasn't that old when all this was taking place. And before the flood came. So my grandma Geneva Brooks Matz and my grandpa Emery Matz, they would go up there every summer and they would raise a garden and they would can. But they used that place. It was always a home for us kids. It was a home for all of, my grandma and grandpa had 9 children, and it was always a very special home for them. It was a place of abundance. It was a place of security, and it was also a place that you gave to others. So Grandpa would raise his garden, and he would supply food for all of the old women, and all of the old men, so that they always had food from that place. When my Uncle Jack, he died in the war, and he was over in Normandy, and he died, and someone was up the river. So this would have been '44, right? So someone was up the river, and they heard someone walking around in the house up the river, up the cabin. And they knocked, say, so who's there? No one answered. But that was the day that he died. And so Grandma Geneva believed that he'd come home, before he was going off to heaven or
I think we have to pause.
Yeah, we'll just pause till the phone stops.
Okay.
Tilt a little over.
Yeah, it'll grab it, the thing. So,
I think it just rolled.
okay.
So after the flood, then this place that you knew as being this kind of idyllic place where all these vegetables and things were raised, what happened to it at that point?
It was no more. They lost land. There was also a big, huge redwood tree up there, and they had already had it appraised, and it would have been about $6,000. And Grandma and Grandpa were going to sell it and use it to, live on and for prosperity, and and that got washed out too. So I think sometimes when you look at Klamath and you look at Rackway and you look at the Yurok people that are here, people now, they see desperation, and they see desolation and poverty, and people who are dependent on the government for things. And that is not who the Yuroks used to be. Grandma Geneva and was very strong after the flood. She was going back up the river, and she was going to rebuild that, and she was going to put in the garden again. And so she would have been 65 years old, and still, because that was so much a part of who they were and who they were as a people, a self-sustaining, generous people who took care of their entire family.
That is such an important thing that I've got to have you say that again without
Okay.
the phone.
Sorry.
Do you want me to answer the phone?
Yeah, can you? Just do, well, it'll, okay.
I'll just.
Probably my husband, okay. What did I say?
Just about how their generosity and sustaining and self-sustaining area.
Yeah, so a lot of that, people now, when they look at the Yurok people, they look at, because we've now gone through generations of government handouts, But when we had what was ours, back when the Yurok's were strong, like I said, we had a house up the hill, and then we had the cabin up the river, and there used to be a little old house that the old grandpa used to live in, up on the river there. And so everybody worked hard. Everybody, you canned and you smoked fish and you fished and you made the garden, and then you would take that and share it with everybody. You would take it to the families, the moms that didn't have husbands. You would take it to the old people, and make sure that they had food. And so when that house was gone, that capacity for us to take care of our own, for many of the Indian Yurok families on this river, that was gone. And so there wasn't that place that you could go and get apples and preserve them and make applesauce and can for the winter. That whole part of our lives was gone. And, Grandma was very strong. She was always very generous. And that was part of being a good Yurok as well, is that you were generous and you were, if you had something and someone didn't have it, you shared with what you had, because that was who you were. There were lots of, not all Yuroks are that way, some Yuroks were ne'er-do-wells and did things, but the majority of the families that lived here and were here for a long time, they were good people, hardworking people. And, we've had people come through the inn, and they've talked about in the 20s and things when all the men were working in the canneries or working in the hills, and it was Indians and non-Indians worked together because everyone was working hard. And then when the Depression came, things changed a little bit, and then after the flood, changed very dramatically down here, and how you could take care of your family. So the flood did more to Delnart County than just wipe out a time period. It wiped out our sustainability, our self-sufficiency. It wiped out who we were as a strong people, being able to take care of each other. Because I think when you are a strong family and you just are barely making it with your children, then how do you help others? And I think you feel that, you still feel that tug, you still feel that hurt, that compassion for other people, and yet you don't have the capacity to help to make it better. And I think that was hard. It was hard on Grandma and Grandpa. They would come up and stay with us. My dad was in the service, and they would come and stay when he'd be transferred elsewhere, away from the home, and they would come and they would stay at it with us, and they would can and make, do butcher cows and butcher deer and all of those things to take care of our family, and they would take a little bit home. So that continuity and that self-sustainability was very much a part of who the people were here. And I'm sure Frances would tell you the same thing. The people who lived here before 1964 in Klamath were strong people who depended on each other and relied on each other. And after that, not so much. Just things changed dramatically after the flood, not just here on the river, but also in Delnart County. So,
Thank you so much for that piece. That was very important.
Could you have John
So a strong people.
say a little bit about the connection of the other families that were related to these farms and how they relied on the food that was coming from those that got lost?
Oh yeah.
So like my Grandma Matz, she lived in Crescent City. That would have been my grandpa's mom. And so when they would have their big garden in up the river, by Brooks Riffle, about our cabin. And they would can the food and then take that in, and that would be part of her sustenance. She worked until she was, I want to say 85. She would walk from Elk Valley, which is about 10 miles, to Crescent City to clean house for a doctor, because that's who they were as people. But she didn't have enough money then after 64 to be able to do the things, that they needed to do, because that extra food was a huge part of everybody's life. So.
How did they get to the property that was upriver? Did they have to take a boat up there?
There were roads, that old logging roads, used to be Simpson, it's Green Diamond now, and they would go up and drive around through there. Yeah, but also they would take a boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering
So.
if the property was, had river front.
Yes, it does have river access. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Our son Thomas, he went up. He's here now, and he works at the inn. And yes, so the last couple of years, he's gone up and put a few $1,000s into the cabin to get it so that it's sustainable again, and people can come and stay there and live. And he's working on putting up a garden up there too, because he's never been there when Grandma and Grandpa. He wasn't here when Grandpa was alive, but he was here when Grandma was here, Grandma Geneva, and that sense of place up there is amazing. It's just again, just that sense of abundance and that sense of this is who we are as a people. We're very strong and very dependent on ourselves and self-reliant, but also care about everyone else and want to be able to help when we can.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Wonderful.
That's all I know.